Hello and welcome to my Bleed Bow Gladiator Leaguestarter. Before we begin, I just want to say that this build guide is made for beginners as well, which basically means if you're new to Path of Exile and you frankly don't know that many things about the game or anything, you can follow along this path of building, as long as you level through and do things and so on. So without further ado, let me introduce you to this POB. This POB has everything or almost everything that you would need for the game throughout the leveling, and then into maps, white, yellow, red, and then theoretical and goal. So we start from Act 1 throughout the acts. These are the levels that I have done myself. I will also link down in the description the VODs from the streams so that you could follow along accordingly. We did do a lot of chatting in between, but on average it takes around 7 to 8 hours to level with a relaxed pace without any major problems. Now, I have reworked it a little bit throughout the playing, so I've changed some auras, changed some things just because I thought they would be better, especially for new players to handle as well. So if we go along through the acts, you will see how the skill tree changes. I will just speed it up a little bit, how the skill tree shapes up until the final act, and then base maps, of course, those being the white maps, then go with the yellow maps, red maps, and then more gear upgrades and so on until the last part where it's theorized what you're going to pick. So as with everything, I will post it in the description below, but now let's go through some simple things. What is this Bleed Bow Gladiator all about? Well, Gladiator has nodes that basically say Arena Challenger, which gives you a Challenger charge whenever you are in Sand Stance. That's a separate ability. Flesh and Stone, which has Blood Stance and Sand Stance. Sand Stance basically gives you extra charges, and when you get into a Sand Stance, it would be a little bit easier to show it like this. So if we go to auras, there we go, Flesh and Stone. Nearby enemies are blinded while in Sand Stance, which means they will have less accuracy rating. You take 15% less damage from attacks from enemies that aren't nearby in the Sand Stance, so everyone outside the yellow circle. Nearby enemies are maimed while in Blood Stance. The cooldown recovery rate is for the stance itself, and enemies maimed by this skill take 11% increased physical damage. Now, if you want to see what maim does, think I have it here at the beginning. Maim makes enemies take more damage, right? And enemies maimed, well, the supported skills deal more damage. So basically, enemies take more damage on the when you are in blood stance for Flesh and Stone. That's basically the gist of it. But what you want to do is for maps and for general mob killing, you want to be in Sand Stance so you can get these Challenger charges, and they give you attack and movement speed, which is a very good thing. You would take this one first while leveling. The next node is Blood in the Eyes, which gives you 50% chance to cause bleeding for your attacks. You get insta-maim on hit against bleeding enemies. You have chance to blind with hits against bleeding enemies, and enemies maimed by you take 10% increased physical damage, which is the same maim effect. Now, what you want to do here is once you get this one, you can remove your chance to bleed, attack, support, well, chance to bleed, support gem from your split arrow and so on. Or if you have other things on the tree that give you bleeding chance, which is usually this cluster for bloodletting, this gives you extra chance to cause bleeding, then you could have removed that before. But that node, bloodletting, and savage wounds node with bleed chance gives you 100% chance to bleed without any support gems. And then once you apply the bleeding, you can then attack enemies with your hits, with your split arrow, to then give them most likely bleeding, oh, not bleeding, pardon, blinding effect. Now, the third node is gratuitous violence, which means bleeding enemies you kill explode, dealing 10% of their maximum life as physical damage, and 20% more damage, physical damage over time. Physical damage over time is bleeding, and whenever you kill an enemy, they will make a nice little popcorn sound, and they will wreak havoc with their explosion. So that's basically what this one is. This is just map clear. It's very, very good. And your last node is once you enter yellow maps or maybe red maps, depending on whether or not you find a trial in a map or whether you drop an offering to the goddess or you buy it, you go and kill Uber Izaro, and then you do this one. You get this one, Outmatch and Outlast. This one gives you Frenzy Charge on kill with main hand, 25% chance, 25% chance to get an Endurance Charge on kill with offhand, 10% more physical damage while at maximum frenzy charges, and 10% reduced physical damage taken while at maximum endurance charges. This one is a half effect, because bows count as your main hand, and quivers are offhand, so quivers don't do damage, which basically means we are always going to have maximum frenzy charges, but we are not going to get endurance charges. There's also a way how you can get frenzy charges, and that's with Mana Forged Gem support and with Frenzy. Let's explain that one while we are here. So you will have Mana Forged Arrows, which basically means whenever you spend an X amount of, usually 3x amount of mana for your ability, the other abilities linked to this ability or linked to this support trigger gem are going to trigger. Now, because we're using a bow, Frenzy is usually a melee skill, but it can be a bow skill, it can be a projectile. Ensnaring Arrow is a projectile anyways. You will see things firing from your character. So if you see the green line and the red line, so those are Frenzy and Ensnaring Arrow. Now let me remove the MTX from this one so you can see it better. You can see one green and one red. Red being the Ensnaring Arrow and green being the Frenzy. Of course, Ensnaring Arrow has an MTX right now, so let's do it again. You will see one extra grayish arrow and one green that fire up. When Frenzy hits, you gain a Frenzy Charge. You get more attack cast speed with, attack damage and attack speed per Frenzy Charge. And when an Ensnaring Arrow hits, that basically slows down enemies, but here is the kicker. Bleed has increased the damage when an enemy is moving, because if an enemy is moving, it's bleeding more, right? Logic. Now, with an Ensnaring Arrow, you force moving onto an immobile enemy. As an example, immobile enemies are some bosses in the game that basically stand around and cast their abilities. That would be, as an example, Cirrus. Cirrus is an endgame boss fight. He stands around and shoots lasers at you. So he doesn't move. You need to apply an Ensnaring Arrow to get extra bleeding damage on him while he is standing still. That's why we use Ensnaring Arrow. Now, this would go with casting 3 times, and then that will be recast as itself, but we can use a clever little trick to skip that. So from Act 7 onwards, you can do this earlier. I do not recommend, but you can do this earlier. You take a life mastery that says skills cost life instead of 30% of mana cost. What that means is 30% of the total mana cost is going to be paid in life. The wording is a little bit iffy. So if a skill costs 10 mana to cast, it will now cost 7 mana to cast and 3 life. Now for Split Arrow, it costs 14 mana and 11 life for me here. If I remove everything from it, let's see how much it is going to cost. There are also cost reductions and so on. It's going to cost 3 life. Now you would ask me why. Reduced mana cost of abilities, mana cost of skills. That's number 1. And number 2, something that we will get later on in the game, which I have now. Non-channeling skills have -7 to total mana cost. If we remove those 2, Split Arrow is going to cost 5 mana and 3 life, which is basically 8 mana. And then you take 30% of 8, 2.4, a little bit of scaling here and there. It's going to take 3 mana, 3 mana away and be life. and 5 mana stays as mana, of course. So you want these modifiers as well later on in the game, so you basically make your arrows fire life. Why is that important that arrows fire life? Well, the reason why it is important is, and that they have a little bit of mana cost, is that you can proc mana forged arrows with every attack. So you need to spend mana on it, unless you have a life tap support. So you need to spend mana. So let's see, 6 mana, 7 life, 2 mana, 6 life, and 1, 2, 3. There we go. Every third one is going to cast that. But the higher you go, it's going to be every one, because you're going to spend more mana and then more life, and that is going to automatically trigger Frenzy and Ensnaring Arrow, which basically cost 2 mana and 6 life. So you just need to, I think you just need to cover the life cost, if I'm not mistaken. There we go, that's 8, and that is 6. Okay, with 6 it fires 2. So it needs to be higher than this. See, everything you want to learn about PoE, you just do basically by experimenting. You can bypass this by using a life tap support. If you use a life tap support, you will always cast those extra things when you spend life. Now I'm not spending, well, it needs to spend mana, right? It needs to spend a bit of mana. Does it spend mana? No, it doesn't. So when you spend mana on abilities and they spend life, they will also cast. So it can be a little bit iffy to manage this, but I've tested with multiple things. You can either do life tap support, and then if you do life tap support, then you don't do, pardon, I put it here this time, and then you don't do this, skills cost life instead of mana cost, then it should work every press or every second press. So there's that. It's quite iffy sometimes, but thankfully I've done this in in a long way, so you can expect this to work on every press like it did in the what's it called, in the guide. So you can do that in every single one of those. Now there's also one more thing that we need to take in consideration, and that is snipe support. Snipe support, well, it's snipe as a skill, and then it can support a gem. Snipe support basically means you channel your main skill, and then you fire when you either run out of mana or when you reach maximum stacks. You can fire yourself. So 6 is maximum without the quality. Once you add quality, it becomes 7. Those are stages. Now, what does Snipe do? Snipe gives you more damage with hits per stage and more damage with ailments per stage. So if we count 7 stages, that's 7 times more, 7.56% times more damage with hits, and then 7 times 8, that's 560, so 5.6 times more damage with ailments. What do we link with Snipe? Snipe gets linked with puncture. Puncture gives you more damage with bleeding, added physical damage, and so on. But if I remove this, puncture is basically just one simple arrow that fires, right? So that's for puncture. Now, when it comes to sniping, you want to snipe. You use snipe instead of puncture, because puncture is going to be disabled. There we go. And then once you fire snipe, it's going to increase the damage of puncture substantially. Our goal with this build is to basically, at the far end game, hit the bleed cap, which is around 35.67 million. And once you do that, you basically fire one charged arrow, and then you run around the enemy. Now, to make this guide sub 20 minutes, and for every question, you can come over to the stream and so on, or ask in this video, of course. I always love to answer questions, because there is no chance you will ever cover everything in a guide, unless that guide is 2, 3, 4 hours long, and nobody wants to watch that. Feel free to ask everything. I will just go through base gems for maps that we will go. So we will go with Split Arrow, Pardon. We'll go with Split Arrow, Mirage Archer, Chain, Vicious Projectiles, Brutality, and Volatility. I will explain what Volatility does. Mirage Archer, so we can apply more bleeds. Split Arrow, which is our main skill, which is that big one that fires a lot of arrows. Chain, so you have when skills chain, they deal damage to more enemies. So they hit enemy 1 and then they hit enemy 2 and enemy 3 because they chain plus 2 times. So you want to apply your bleed to as many targets as possible. You can do pierce, but chain seems to be better nowadays for playing in maps as it guarantees a shot, while pierce they need to be behind the target. So that works well. Vicious projectiles gives you more damage over time. Brutality is one important thing, which gives you more physical damage, but eliminates any other damage type that you may do, which means eliminates chaos and elemental damage, but you deal way more physical damage. And volatility is going to be one important thing. Volatility you will see on 3 things in the build. 1 on the passive skill tree as a mastery, 1 as a skill gem, and 1 on the belt. What volatility does is supported skills deal more maximum attack damage and they deal less minimum attack damage. Which means, so let's go with this one, 54 maximum, 66 minimum. Less, pardon. That means if you're dealing 100 damage with a shot, let's say with puncture, 100 damage, this will give you 54%. So it will spread out from 100 because not every skill is direct damage. It's a variable in a bracket. This will give you from 100 being the base, 154 as maximum hit, and 100 and minus 34 for minimum hit. So you can hit between 34 and 154. That's what it does. Now, because we're playing an average game, and every bleed applied before the previous one overrides the previous one, so stronger bleed will apply. What you want to do is you want to pull the arrow, fire the arrow, and then you can pull the arrow later again to fire it again. Now, this will also do well with split arrow because with more hits, the bleed is stronger. With higher hit, the bleed is stronger, and you want to reapply split arrow, and it has a very fast cast time, so you won't have any problems with it. Now, the other 2 places are on the skill tree. I will just go for this one. On the skill tree, it is a physical mastery plus 10% more maximum physical attack damage, which gives you more damage, right? And then on the belt, which is going to be one of the things that we need, which is called Ryslatha's Coil. This gives you more maximum physical attack damage and less minimum. What do you want to do? You want to get as low minimum number as possible and as high maximum number as possible. Now, with my guides, I like to write things down for every single thing that you have. As I said, I do forget some things, so keep that in mind. Please do read or ask me if you have any questions. Now for base gear, there we go. Pay attention to less and more, and I wrote what it does. Basically, what you want to follow is you want less minimum and more maximum. That's what it is. And now the final thing is the bow. This is the bow that we are going to play with as a base. This is the only unique that is required to do more things for cheaper, but depending on the league and how the league is going to progress, you can buy a better bow for cheaper, better physical bow for cheaper. Now, in the base mapping gear, I have any bow that's above 200 DPS, physical DPS. That's what you want, and that's it. You slap brutality. When you do this one, you want to have resolute technique. Now, when you do Lionized Glare, you do not need to take resolute technique because it has a modifier that says hits can't be evaded. So keep that in mind. Pay attention to to that one. If you miss one passive point, if you put resolute technique in with Lionized Glare, it doesn't really matter because you are going to change Lionized Glare later. Now, Lioness Glare is around 450 to 480, maybe 500 physical DPS bow. If it is above 50 chaos at league start, which it sometimes tends to be depending on the league start, I would suggest buying any 300-400 physical DPS bow for 10 chaos and then buying a 6 link. That's going to be way more damage than buying a Lioness Glare. However, if you can afford it, you can go for Lioness Glare, or you can immediately go for a 500 plus physical DPS bow. But at League Start, those ain't gonna be crafted, so good luck finding that. Lioness Glare is always a safe option. Now, your actual proper purchase is going to be Corrupted 6 link, which you want colors. You want this to have evasion rating if possible, because it's going to save you money later on down the track when you go for spell suppression gear, and on the tree when you pick up the mastery for evasion, which gives you chance to suppress spell damage if equipped helmet, body armor, gloves, and boots have evasion rating. Now everything is written. You just need to do the drop downs and select things. I will also, in the description, link my own guides for how to read a path of building. So you will have that attached as well. So then you won't have to worry, why did Heavy miss some information here? If it is not written, it is also not implied. It is being said in the PoE for Dummies Path of Building tools video. Those are around 20 minutes long per, and there's like 4 or 5 of them, so up to an hour. But read through everything, pay attention to what is added here. The theory part is left as theory. I will update this guide as I play. This is just a League Starter video. It will get a proper guide later on, where I will explain everything that I've done and so on. So one more thing, to pay attention to when you select a tree. Pay attention, there's base trees, what I've done, and you just update one by one. Base gems, gems yellow maps, items, base items, and then passive tree, you can update it here. So keep in mind, always do those and update in time. For any questions, feel free to ask in the comments or on my streams. I stream almost daily. I will try to stream daily when the league launches. There will be more beginner guides to come. This is just a League Starter video. Now, if you've liked the video, please do give it a like, sub if you don't mind. Thank you so much. We're trying to reach 1,000 subs, hopefully by the end of Necropolis League. We'll see how it goes. For any other things, feel free, as I said again, to join the streams. We do have memberships. They are still work in progress. I'm sorry, those are low priority now. The goal is to do more beginner guides, proper beginner guides, do the revamp of PoE for Dummies series, and put up more of these. Next video for Bleed Bow Gladiator is going to be in around a week's time, when the league has been there for 3 to 5 days. It will just be a quick update where I will import my POB for you guys to see as well. And that's it. So once again, thank you so much for watching. Have a great league start. I hope you like this build, and I will see you on a stream or in the next video.